If there's any pushback on your NHL prospects, I guess it's been about size. How do you respond to those?
I think I'm 5'11", which isn't too small. I think that's a pretty good size, actually. I'm 18 years old. I'm going to get a lot older, a lot stronger.
Is that a concern at all for you?
This is Hall of Fame goaltender Martin Brodeur. And despite taking the consensus #1 pick in Jack Hughes in the 2019 draft, the Devils and their front office are still being asked the question if size is a concern for management. Fast forward 3 years later, and Jack Hughes is a bona fide superstar, who's once again off to a hot start. The crazy part is that his current height and weight are listed at 5'11", 175 pounds. That's only 5 pounds heavier than his draft year. But the truth is, Hughes never needed to get any heavier, and that's because the NHL has completely changed. And right now, we're seeing it unfold right in front of our eyes. At the start of the 2023 season, Jack Hughes is on fire, and he's having nights where he could easily be regarded as a top 3 player in the NHL. And he's doing all of it while being undersized. Hughes has learned what every smaller player needs to master in order to be a game breaker in the NHL, and that's bending the game towards his skill set. Hughes can burn guys with speed, but that's a rare occurrence against NHL defenders. Instead, Hughes primarily generates his offense off the rush by using his vision and playmaking. If you watch him create, Hughes is constantly using speed changes and button hooks to buy time for his team to enter the zone so that they can attack with numbers. Hughes will use a lot of east-west lateral movements to back up the D so that he can create space and seams for his teammates. This is extremely similar to how Patrick Kane generated offense for years, another undersized player who knew how to bend the game to his terms. Similar to Hughes off the rush, Kane also used button hooks, speed changes, and lateral movements on zone entries to mess up a defender's gap and open up space for a teammate. Hughes has become a monster at this skill, and as he's matured and become more and more patient and confident at the NHL level, his game has noticeably taken off. So far this season, Jack Hughes leads all NHL players in rush chances with 14. The player closest to him is Connor Bedard, who, by the way, also got the size treatment before being drafted and will likely get it for his entire career. This is one element of the game in which undersized players should thrive in. But what happens when the playoffs roll around and size and tenacity becomes much more of a factor? But really, that's what makes Hughes a superstar, because he still bends the game to his style even when things get tight. For smaller players, their size can make it difficult to get to the dirty areas around the net. But the very best undersized players in the NHL use their timing and IQ to avoid playing at a disadvantage. Take Jonathan Marchessault, who is a 5'9" undrafted player who won the Conn Smythe last year by doing this exact thing. All throughout his career, and especially in that playoff run, Marchessault timed his attacks so that he arrived in the slot at the perfect time. Hughes does this as well. As a smaller player, you can't just go to the net or slot and stay there, because you'll get boxed out easily by a bigger defender. Instead, undersized players like Hughes pick their spots carefully and time their entry to bend the game to their terms. But even when the space is extremely tight, Hughes doesn't let size impact his game. During his playoff series against Carolina last year, watch how he insists on combining his skill with his compete to make a nifty play. Despite being squeezed out by a bigger defender, he still positions himself in the right spot to create just enough separation to leverage his skill and make a play. Whenever space is completely taken away from Hughes, like on this play here, his compete and drive to extend the play doesn't fizzle out. That is something that can't be quantified. And when you're competing for a Stanley Cup, it's arguably the most important quality. This is something that has always been in Hughes' game ever since day one. Because even though Hughes went #1, his first few years in the NHL were not pretty. Hughes was the first top selection of the cap era to score fewer than 30 points as an 18-year-old, and that validated many scouts and analysts who argued that he was not physically ready to make the leap into the NHL. This domination from Hughes wasn't something that happened overnight. It took time and it took work. And if you ask his former teammate PK Subban, he'll tell you that despite his size, All the fundamentals of being a superstar were already there.
Knew at 18 years old, I said, Jack Hughes is going to be a superstar in this league. I'm in training camp with Jack, and we had this drill where they put the tires on the ice. And the objective is to take the puck and skate it through the middle of the tire. The other guy's job is to stop you from doing that. I got one hand on my stick, I got one hand on Jack, and I'm literally picking him up, lifting him as I skate the puck through the tires.
Thanks for playing, Jack.
I wasn't even thinking about embarrassing him. I was competing, but I wanted to see how he competed.
Yeah.
I wanted to see where his drive was, whether he was going to quit, whether he was going to give up, be discouraged. No, that guy does not get enough credit for his compete and his drive and his will.
In today's game, size still matters, but it is simply a tool, not the toolbox itself. If you look at how all these smaller players find success in today's game, you'll find a lot of similarities. And at the time of this video, there's currently a 5'8" player leading the NHL in scoring. You don't have to be a 6'3" monster to dominate the NHL. Really, you never had to be. Jack Hughes is just another name on a long list of undersized players who are continuing to prove just how much the game has changed.